Okay, we should be good to go.
All right, super. Thanks. I'll call the meeting to order. First up is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to make an addition or an alteration to the agenda?
No.
Seeing none. That the agenda be approved as presented. Looking for a mover and a seconder. I got Ron and I got Bill. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the agenda as it is? Thank you. Anybody have a pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none. Minutes of the previous meeting, November 10th, which we thought was going to be our last meeting, but here we are. That the minutes of the Council Remuneration Committee meeting held November 10th, 2025 be approved. Looking for a mover and a seconder. I got Ron and Ann. Any discussion or any amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approval of those minutes? Those are approved. We have a staff report, and maybe what I'll do before, just kind of to reiterate, Bill, you were at I think you were part of that call when we had the sit down with council with some questions. There were primarily, I think, two questions that were focused on. The first one was really about the mayor looking for a preamble that just explained what compensation for council would look like. Just wanting to have some preamble in the policy. And then there was a broader discussion about what would be considered special events and the termination or the terminology that we use for special events, specifically that we reference Remembrance Day, but maybe didn't reference any other significant national events. So the discussion was to bring back some amendments to the committee to review, make those changes, and then present it back to council for hopefully adoption this time. So that's a little bit of preamble there that kind of just give you a bit of an update for those that weren't able to be at the meeting back last, I guess it was last month, yes. So we have a report there, report COR 2026-003 is to be received, and that the committee provide direction on the amendments to the draft 2026-2030 council remuneration policy. First, I'll ask for a mover and a second, and we're going to have any discussion. So looking for a mover. I got Bill, and then a seconder, Ann. So I'll open up the floor to any comments, questions from any committee members.
I have a comment to make.
Okay.
I noticed, as I read through that and I saw the sort of the comments that were coming through, I went back to the current policy prior to these changes. And in the current policy, we did have council salaries up front as part of the policy. And I guess that kind of explains a bit of it, but it also would be, I think maybe they're looking for an explanation as to why this proposal is changing significantly the style of compensation. So I'd just be interested to see whether that, anyone else is thinking the same sort of thing.
I think from the meeting, I think that's exactly what they're looking for. I think they're looking for more of a explanation preamble, if you will, of why this is a better way to approach compensation versus the old compensation plan. And so I thought it was fairly, they were looking for was fairly simple. To your point, Anne, is like, why do we believe this is better than the other plan? What's the benefits of this type of compensation plan, which we kind of have in the in one of the documents where we list the pros and cons
Mhm.
of the of the two types of plans. And so I'm wondering if we just maybe rather than reinvent a wheel, go back to that and kind of try and merge that into the document itself. As long as we don't think that opens it up to too much, you know, too many comments or too many questions. But the other thing I would say is from the council, both council meetings, and this is just my take, and Brad, maybe you can think differently, is that they are fine with this new suggested compensation plan. They just want a little bit of explanation.
Thanks, Bill. Carly, I'm hoping I'm not putting you in the spot. Would it make sense that when I look at the policy, we've got the policy purpose and scope, and then maybe add a heading called preamble? And just simply have something written in there that kind of explains, that, the policy was amended in whatever date we want to use, amended to convert council compensation to a primarily salary with per diems and so on. And I think I'll let you work the language. I'm sure you can put something together, but does that make sense to everybody, just to maybe add that one heading there right after policy purpose and scope, but before definitions, just a preamble?
I still think you need to include the proposed salaries, because that's, like I say, it was in the prior one, and there's nowhere in this policy that's talking about what the salary is or what it would be.
Can you add the salaries as a schedule to the or an appendix to the report, so that it doesn't become fixed, that the salaries can be changed from year to year through the schedule attached to it?
Well, why? I'm sorry. I'd ask, why would you add it to the end? I mean, the whole purpose here is that we are proposing that council be compensated by a salary. So to me, that would be up front. And it does include, as it did last time, the fact that it's subject to annual review and change according to the council's, or pardon me, the township's salary for senior managers, I think it is, or something like that. But I'd just soon have it up front to say, because anybody looks at that and they don't see it. And then why would they go all the way through it and
Yeah.
not see the fact that we're recommending a salary? Everything else is different, or an add-on to it.
So if it goes into the policy as opposed to an attachment or a schedule, if the compensation goes up every year by the cost of living or whatever, does it then have to be reapproved? Or would it be any different if it was in the policy versus the like an attachment or a schedule? That would be my only thought.
The current policy states council salary. It's the first thing. The salary for members of council shall be adjusted annually by the same COLA increase awarded to non-union township staff. And then there's a small three line chart of what the salary is going to be. So
I believe it's Carly's got her hand up, so maybe I'll let Carly speak to it. Your comment, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yes, Member Glenn and Member Haldane are on the same line of thinking that staff had been originally, because those COLA increases will change the salary. So basically 3 months after the policy comes into effect, those policy salary amounts are no longer correct. So council will start in November, and they will be approving a budget potentially in January or February where COLA is then applied. So those salary amounts are only correct for a few months. So something that the treasurer and I had been discussing was when the policy is presented, having council set the rates as we had intended with the November 19th report for council to approve those set salaries. And then what we would do is from those set salaries that don't need to form a part of the policy but still need to be approved by council and set for the next term, that we would have a section of the website that spoke to council remuneration, and it would have the current rates, and those rates we would adjust annually so that there was some public disclosure around what the salary levels were for that year. So it would just avoid us having to adjust the policy every year when those salary adjustments would be approved in budget. So it would just eliminate having to do that update to the policy as well. So it would, you would have a schedule that would essentially be no longer useful after 3 months. And then, or you would be in a situation where staff were updating that schedule every year to reflect the current date. So that's why they weren't included, but it's totally up to the committee if they'd like to see it included in the schedule, or if they would like to see it perhaps just presented by way of a recommendation to council, and then that is adjusted in accordance with the budget in a central place where the public can see that amount then being adjusted.
So can I ask a question, Carly? So if we included it as a schedule to the policy, and the schedule gets amended every year, basically, a council approval of the budget, correct? Then we could just, would that work? Could we just have it as a schedule? So I think that's also what the mayor was getting at too, was wanting to have something appended to the policy with the salary compensation too. It's one of the comments that was received. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we were trying to avoid, because it's essentially a double approval. So they approve their COLA increase as council during budget, and then we would have to present the amended schedule as a bylaw as well. So just trying to eliminate that when there's already a mechanism for the salaries to be adjusted by both the current policy and in budget. So we didn't include it in there for that reason, but if the committee would like to do it that way, we can certainly accommodate that.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand what Anne's trying to accomplish too. But I think I do understand, based upon my own experiences, that trying to keep policies, so what I want, current or not outdated, can be challenging sometimes based upon wording. So thinking about that, I think the preamble approach to just make it clear, maybe that preamble references to the process that you just spoke about, Carly, in terms of how that's presented. And then on the website, there's some reference, I don't know how you reference it. You could call it Schedule 1 or Schedule A, whatever it ends up being. You reference it, Schedule A is a separate document that's approved by council on an annual basis. Those two kind of fit together, but the policy references Schedule A. And then when they're presented on the website, they're together. And then Schedule A just gets shuffled out each year. Does that make sense? Is that what you're kind of thinking?
The treasurer can correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, it was just to avoid, once this policy is approved by bylaw, having to bring forward an amending bylaw every year to update the policy. So it was hoped that there could be a separate mechanism where council approves the salary to start with, and then each and every year they approve the COLA increases. So then that amount is adjusted, and then through a public disclosure, we would keep that information central on the website for the public to view at any point in time, and the remuneration policy would be in that section as well.
Okay.
Brett?
Go ahead, Anne.
If that's if that's a reason to not put the actual dollar amounts in, I mean, I don't agree with it, but I'll live with it. But I still think that we need to then in the preamble talk about the fact that we have moved from the old system and the new system, and I don't see why you couldn't put in there some indication of what the salaries are going to be. If I was a reader, and we're going to talk about the fact that we're changing it to a salary-based compensation, I'd want to know what the salary is without having to go on the website. So that's kind of my point.
I mean,
Whether you
wouldn't,
put it in there, what it is effective on the date that the policy is established or whatever, but.
I see you, Bill.
wouldn't it be just as effective to in the preamble say see Schedule A, and then everybody can say when they're reading it, they see Schedule A and just flip over to Schedule A. I think we're all talking about transparency, and I think that that doesn't affect transparency at all, and people should be able to read and go, okay, well, I have to go to Schedule A. So I don't see that as a difficulty. As long as we can in the preamble go see Schedule A, and then you can just flip over to that, and then it takes away the need to have it reapproved every year. And it's still fully transparent in terms of salary. You just have to go to the end of the document. And I mean, you know.
Okay. And
So the question I have then, why is Schedule A not considered to be part of the policy? Because I'm used to policies and procedures. I used to run a group in a major Canadian bank of policies and procedures, and Schedule A would be part of the policy. So is the township system different? That Schedule A does not form part of the bylaw?
I'll let you speak to it, Carly. I think I know the answer, but you're the clerk, so I'll let you answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yes, so if it was a schedule to the policy, it would form part of the policy, so long as the schedule was referenced in the body of the policy. However, if it's a schedule that forms part of the policy, it would need to be amended year over year by bylaw to actually have the correct salary amounts. So even to your point, Anne, Member Duman, as a person who's reading the policy, unless you're going to do the math year over year and apply COLA, depending at what point you're reading it, you're not going to have the correct salary amount anyway. So after that 3-month period, then COLA is applied during budget, and that salary amount that the committee has set is then it's post dated. So if there's a more central place that it can be updated, since it's already being approved in budget, is kind of what we were getting at. And not calling it something like a schedule to the policy, but perhaps something we could do differently and call it, 2026 council salary document, or something that was separate from the policy that we could simply update as part of the budget process, where it's being approved anyway. So it was just trying to avoid having to update the policy year over year when we're already having those approvals in front of council through budget.
Sure, Ron.
Yeah, so this question for Carly. So I fully understand we don't want to have to bring the schedule or the policy back to council for approval annually. But to council's point, how do we, as a first year, one time, establish a salary that's transparent in the report or in the policy, so that the initial, I know we've addressed it in the policy that says it's subject to COLA, the same increase that staff get. So it automatically adjusts it, but how do we make it transparent of what we're adjusting from day one. Can we include that as a table in the report or an appendix to the report? So here's the salary that we're recommending day one, and it is subject to an automatic renewal COLA increase pursuant to the policy. I think that's what council is trying to get at, is how do we be transparent of saying what is our salary being recommended? The policy addresses the increases so that you don't have to bring it back, but how do we make it transparent day one?
Go ahead, Carly. Then I have a thought comment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. To Member Glenn's point, that is how it was presented to council on November 19th. So those salaries were recommended in the report from the committee. So we had those recommended salaries for council's consideration at that time, separate from the policy. So the intention was to have council set the salaries and the policy. So they would be two separate approval items that were presented simultaneously. I guess that that might have been a little bit confusing. So I think what we as staff would recommend to avoid, having the schedule that needs to be updated year over year is to be a little bit more intentional when this policy goes back to council and have a separate or more pronounced version of the report that makes it clear that these are the salaries that are recommended, and this is what the committee is recommending be put into place effective November 2026.
But it would be separate from the policy.
Okay, so my thought process, and I think this is where I think you're going, Carly. I think you kind of preempted what I was going to say is, so the preamble then I think would have to reference that the salary and compensation, the compensation is approved under a separate bylaw. Is that fair? Under a separate bylaw on an annual basis based upon council's decisions. Is that fair? That's to you, Carly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yes, maybe not necessarily a bylaw, but something that we could incorporate into the budget process. So something that we could reference. I'm definitely inviting the treasurer to chime in because I feel like I'm not explaining this super well. When we came up with the idea before this meeting, it made a lot of sense. So I fear that I'm not doing it justice. So I invite her to jump in if she has any additional commentary, but yeah, it would be separate from the policy, and I'll invite Sam to make sense of my very jumbled explanations.
Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you, and through you. I recognize both sides of what we're trying to accomplish here, the transparency. As Carly mentioned, we do want to try to keep them semi-separate for the purposes of a policy, because then the policy would need updated every single time that we change the schedule, if it is attached as the schedule. So I was wondering if for the group, is it something that in our salary section of the policy that you currently have, it is that it's recommended a strictly salaried compensation structure be implemented for ease of management and administration, increased fairness and transparency to prospective candidates and to the public, increased leadership quality with adequate compensation to attract qualified individuals, and increase accountability, which may enable increased participation in local governments. Those annual salaries can be found on the Mayor and Council section of the township's website. And as a practice aspect, which I don't know how you'd want to document in the policy, when handing out or providing the policy, you're also providing the applicable year's remuneration schedule or remuneration table. But it's also on our website for transparency purposes, right where we also disclose the remuneration and expenses paid each year that we have to under the Municipal Act. Is that maybe a path to take? Still referencing that it will be increased each and every year based on COLA. And maybe you also want a disclaimer, the COLA amount will be set as part of annual budget processes.
I'm just going to maybe try to speak on behalf of the committee. So I think what the committee is trying, I think what they're struggling with is they want the policy to be able to make it very clear that it is, one, a salary compensation process, and two, what that salary is. So I think we can accomplish both. So I'm going to offer a solution here. So why don't we include it as a schedule? What the compensation was, what will be established as the date of the approval of the policy, and then maybe have some big disclaimer or some note simply saying there, this compensation will be adjusted annually by council, and then refer to whatever document it is, whether it's another schedule or whatever you guys are going to call it. I think that might keep the policy from having to change year to year, but it also makes it very clear what the starting point was. Sorry, Allison, I got a tickle in my throat. And if we did that, then I think that would satisfy the committee, but it would also keep from the policy having to change. And then exactly as you said, Samantha, that the reference can always be made to the actual document as long as it's clearly referenced in that schedule. That's part of the policy. Does that make sense? Everybody understand what I'm trying to say?
It would be helpful to see a draft of what Samantha's proposing. That was a little hard to follow.
With my suggestion though, Anne, like with that, including that, I like sort of what I heard of the preamble, but then having something in the document itself says what's the starting point. Go ahead, Carly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I think probably what's best to do is gather all of the feedback from the committee and have the discussion about the feedback that came through council. And then between Sam and I, we can merge the policies and the reports together to get more of that preamble, and then look at the options for that salary disclosure and bring it back to the committee. So then you can see, you know, what it looks like in a succinct way, and then decide if you like it the way it is or if you'd like to tweak it before it goes back to council. But we're more than happy to take all the feedback from today and give you something that's clean, and you can have a read and review of everything, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I think Carly, the big thing for me is that if I pick up the report on council remuneration and the policy, that there has to be something attached to it, tell me what council's making that current year. And if there's a way that we can link the one report back into the other report, that there's actually a table, or as Brad says, a schedule or an appendix, that it says, here's the council remuneration for 2030. So that I don't have to go flipping to a web page to find something else, but I can see the policy and some updated table that shows what council's making.
Yeah, I know what staff's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, me too.
I also hear what the committee is saying, and I do as a, when I put my ratepayer hat on, I do find at times sometimes policy is a little bit cumbersome because they are trying so hard to not do that process. But I think, you know, I mean, the worst case is there's a bylaw passed that amends not so much the policy, but amends the amendment is strictly that a schedule one's been amended.
Yeah.
And that's the bylaw.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
There's
That
a heck of a lot of our constituents who would not be going to the website to look at anything either. So
Yeah.
I just know that from being around council meetings.
So I think that's the thought process. I think I'll leave that with staff to kind of where the committee sits on it. Go ahead, Carly, you had your hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I was just going to agree. And the intention is that we want people to look at the policy and actually know what the salary is. And the fear was, well, it would be an out-of-date version of the salary if we included it in the way that the discussion ensued around the council table. So I think the best thing to do at this point is for Sam and I just to take all the feedback from the committee and maybe look at creative ways that we can present that. You know, is there the ability for us to create a table and forecast them out according to COLA for the rest of the term? And then is there an ability for us to put kind of like an asterisk, you know, if there are any additional changes, and yeah, I guess we would have to play that sort of thing by ear if there were any additional amendments through the policy throughout the term. But yeah, I think Sam and I can take the feedback and work within that.
Yeah, I think if we work it from a standpoint that when council approves whatever the COLA is going to be and that's applied, then there's a just simply an amendment to the bylaw updating Schedule 1. And then you just all you do is create that consolidated bylaw showing that you know Schedule 1's been updated. Yeah. I don't want to get council, clearly obviously don't want council looking at the council remuneration policy in terms of the terminology on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so you try to avoid them actually looking at the whole policy. It'd just be that they'd be passing a bylaw that would be amending Schedule 1. And then the new Schedule 1 just gets inserted into the policy each year.
Although, Brad, the policy is reviewed by council on an annual basis.
Yeah. You just hate them getting into it. Yeah. You're right. You're correct, Dan. It's just sometimes sticking a policy in front of council sometimes can, you know, they kind of maybe start looking at the whole policy. Really, all you're asking them to do is look at the schedule. Go ahead, Carly, get your hand up still. I don't know if that's old or new.
In terms of historical context, understanding it gets reviewed every year, how often do changes get suggested? Like, is that common every year, or is it more of a rubber stamp renewal review?
That'd be a question for Carly, specific to Georgian Bluffs. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I wanted to make reference to that. The former policy does say that it's reviewed on an annual basis. However, the version that this committee recommended to council has an entirely new section. So the version that you were recommending to council has a routine basis for monitoring and not an annual basis for monitoring. As well, it builds in those provisions that if they'd like to make any changes, especially those that have an impact to the amounts of remuneration paid, that it would come back to the committee for review for transparency. We did have in the current term of council, the remuneration committee make recommendations to council and approved the council remuneration policy. A year later, that policy was entirely replaced without review of the committee. So the policy that Anne would have been a part of recommending in the last term of council is not even close actually to the policy that exists today. So it's just to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen without that comprehensive consultation and having a committee comprised of citizens like yourself that have some input into that.
Yeah, I remember you telling us that was the case. Yeah.
Good point. That was a good question. So, Karen, I'm gonna take it from the conversation discussion is that staff will draft a preamble and look at some of the suggestions the committee's made in terms of how to clearly articulate what the compensation will be or is the effect of the new term of council. Is that correct? Is that how I understand it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I think that's a fair approach. I think the only other item we need direction from the committee on is with respect to the special events pieces. So I think in that council meeting, I had presented some recommended wording off the top of my head to replace Remembrance Day. So I'll float that by the committee if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
So it was to replace point number 4 under attendance at special events, where it says Remembrance Day ceremonies. I had recommended some wording that says days of significant ceremonies where a member of council has been invited to participate in an official capacity. So that would be all encompassing and would cover any other days of significance outside of Remembrance Day.
Go ahead, Bill.
And I think that's I like that, Carly, and I think that you know is what Brad had said at the meeting. It almost at one point sounded like council wanted us to list every single event that they would that they would be eligible for compensation for, and I think there was a bit of a discussion on, well, you know, it really should be, you know, council deciding this, not the committee. So I think that serves the purpose of the discussion, is to allow them to decide what should be in there and not have recommendations from us. Because I think, Brad, if I'm not not wrong, they initially wanted us to recommend days, and you had pushed back on that and said, well, really, it's your call. And so I think this wording takes care of that. So I like that.
Well, I think my concern was we just be in this circle process where we come forward with, you know, three event days or whatever, special events, and then someone would say, well, what about this? And I said, okay, well, you guys got to tell us what it would be. I think there was some conversation with the CEO at the time, and sort of him agreeing that we would be in this sort of infinite circle. And then I think, Carly, you spoke that you could put some language together that would be a little bit. And I think that language, I'm comfortable with that language. My only question, I guess, would be is it going to be so vague that members of council are going to get confused as to whether their attendance at a special event is to be compensated or not? I guess is where I struggle. Remembrance Days usually, at least in my experience, in my municipal days, Remembrance Day is usually not a challenge, because usually at some point before Remembrance Day, there's kind of that conversation about what council member is going to attend what Remembrance Day ceremony at what location, and they all kind of agree upon it, and it's kind of covered. But if you have, the day of reconciliation, which is what I think Councillor Day was speaking about, is that going to be the same process where they're going to make it clear that, Councillor Day is going to attend as a representative, or Mayor Carleton's going to be attending as the representative? I guess that's the problem that we can create into this, is if it's so vague, then council needs to be very specific about who's going and for what purpose. Because what I don't think is right is if, let's say Ron was a member of council and Bill was a member of council, and council said, Bill, you're going to go and be our representative at the Shallow Lake Remembrance Day ceremonies, and then Ron shows up too and just watches. Does that mean Ron gets compensated or not get compensated? And my opinion would be he shouldn't. As a ratepayer, I don't think that's, he's not there in an official capacity, and maybe that's the wording that might need to be in that statement that you just read, Carly, is that they're there on an official capacity and not on a personal capacity. Your hand's up, Carly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that in the wording that I read out, in an official capacity is on the end of it.
Okay.
Can you read it out entirely again, please, Carly?
Sure. Days of significant ceremonies where a member of council has been invited to participate in an official capacity.
Okay.
So there has to be an invitation, and they have to be invited to attend as a member of council on behalf of council.
Okay. Is that I see your hand there, Ron. I'll get you in a sec. So is that going to be problematic? Do you see any issues, I guess, from a staff perspective, being problematic in terms of making sure that's clearly articulated throughout the year for whatever these days might entail? That's a question for you guys to contemplate, I guess. You don't have to answer maybe now, but contemplate that as to how you're going to make sure that's working. And I mean, in fairness, Councillor Day also spoke to the fact that there are several, special events that she would attend that she wouldn't feel comfortable asking for it to be compensated for because she's there because she feels she should be there. Part of her role. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment. If the new wording for 4 is as Carly put it, there's a little bit of a problem with the policy because the last sentence says council approval is not required for the following event types in an official capacity. And then we list the 5. So if you put 4 in, you're saying it's not approval, but it is required. Approval isn't required, and then it is required. So there's a little bit of a problem with that wording in 4 as it relates to the paragraph, the concluding sentence.
Yeah, good catch, Ron.
I think when we started off, we were trying to get to the point where, for example, Remembrance Day ceremonies that you could, if you chose to go, you didn't need council approval. It was one of those ones of your 5 that you could pick to go to on an annual basis, and you didn't have to have council approval. So if you wanted to go to Canada Day, you want to go to Family Day, you want to go to Truth and Reconciliation Day, you could pick to go to those as part of your 5 annual ones, but you didn't need council approval to go to them. But if you were going to number 6, council would have to approve your attendance as a request. That's how I remember when we had that discussion around these special events. And now we're getting back into saying, well, we want council to have discretion at any of those events for specific requests. So I hear Councillor Day saying, but I think I also heard, I think Isaac Soldice in my interview said, to the extent, maybe I shouldn't have said Isaac, but in my interview with one of the council members, said each year we have to debate who's going to represent on behalf of a certain day, and I go anyway, and some get remunerated and some don't. And because I go to Remembrance Day in Shell Lake versus Remembrance Day in Wyerton versus Remembrance Day in Katy, 2 get remunerated and 1 doesn't because they've been requested by council, and we wanted to get away from that. So I just want to make sure that we're not losing the intent of what we started with the policy by the changes.
Fair enough.
I think it's always been a challenge amongst the council members. Who goes and who shouldn't go, and I think they were just trying to lay it off on us, Brad. Quite frankly.
Yeah. Well,
you guys decide.
Yeah, well, I think that's true, but I think the main comment was that we were very specific to Remembrance Day, and I think Council Day was sort of saying that the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was absent.
Mm-hmm.
So shouldn't it be? Sorry, go ahead, Brad.
No, well, I was going to say keep it where it was. Barring, I liked what you had, Carly, but I'm thinking if we keep what Ron's trying to say, what if number 4 just simply got changed to national or provincial significant, national or provincial
days of significance.
Days of significance or something like that, yeah.
I'd be fine with that, Brad, because then it gives them a lot of discretion of what those are.
Yeah. And it makes it clear that it has to be national and provincial.
Right.
Yeah, but we've already got in there that events by other levels of government.
Well, that I think that's meant to refer to like if there was some event that the government was having, not not a significant day per se, just an event that they've been invited to. Because periodically they will have. I wish I could think of something off the top of my head, Ann, but I know in the past there are certain things that they'll attend that are provincial dates,
Yeah, it could be,
provincial events, like the MPP might be hosting uh, a conversation around a certain specific issue and asking for attendance at those things, and they could be a 2-3 hour conversation discussion.
provincial grant for a recreational facility and the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, for exactly. Yeah. How's everybody feel about changing it based upon kind of what Ron and I had suggested, and kind of keeping the language there that council approval is not required?
Would
Everybody-
it
Go
be
ahead.
simpler to just add the days that I think it was you said it was Councillor Day was remarking on?
It could be, and it could be, honestly.
Oh, National Aboriginal Day or whichever one.
Well, I think we were trying to avoid getting in that situation where we'd go and we'd list that, we'd make that, the natural truth and reconciliation number 5, and then number 5 would become 6, and then we get to council, and all of a sudden they pick another date or another date that we, didn't list, and not that I can think of anything off the top of my head what that would be, but
Christmas break.
but in fairness, where you're going in is that I think it might be the right approach too, because at what point in time do you stop, right? Because if I listen to the radio, just about every day is a significant day for something. It's
Yeah.
National Guinea Pig Day, or it's National Cancer Day, or National
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know.
So that's why I think it's the council's responsibility to come up with those days, not ours. If they don't want, and if we're not comfortable with a more of a catch-all, then I think it's the council's responsibility between themselves to come up with a list of days that they believe are the appropriate ones to have listed in the policy, not us.
Well, I think that, as you said, Ann, this is where they've always struggled. So
Yeah.
I think in some respects maybe it's so. And I'm not sure exactly how you would go about getting council to decide what's what, because you'd have to almost sit there and go through each day and say, well, is it in or out? And maybe that's the process that you have to go through. But so I think we got two options here. One is to list National Truth and Reconciliation as number 5 and move number 5 to 6, or just simply say that any day that's a national or provincial day of significance, and leave it vague.
Yeah, there's probably, if we look at both either the provincial or the federal guidelines, there's probably a definition of what would be, a significant day. So maybe some research could be done to just find out how that would be best phrased. I
Okay.
often find going to other publications, you can find something.
Okay, good suggestion. Any other thoughts on how we could approach that special events? Okay. Is that enough for you, Carly, to work with and do a little bit of research, so when we meet next, they'd have something guess there's a couple options we left on the table, but I guess if we could do what Ann suggested was look at and see if there's any other terminology or definition that would apply. It might be as simple as just adding truth and reconciliation as another day, and that might solve the question that was being raised or the significance of what was being raised. I did push back at the meeting trying to get council to say, what do you want included? And then they just kind of looked at each other and didn't quite really know what to say. So we were trying to maybe work some loosey-goosey language, but then I think if we get loosey-goosey, then it becomes a little bit, what's the definition of that? So
maybe that is sorry, Brad, maybe that is the way to go, because nobody else had any concerns with the listed events other than the one counselor, and her only concern was for Truth and Reconciliation Day. So, I mean, maybe the simple way to do this is to add that day, and then back to them, because there was no feedback of any other potential days or anything. So, I mean, maybe we keep it simple and just add the day that was suggested to the list.
Yeah, just Brad, if you do a quick Google search for key national days of significance, comes up with 3: Canada Day, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and Remembrance Day.
Ah, good for you.
I mean, there's nothing. I mean, maybe the other way is, and I think it's already written somewhere in that part of the policy is that, any member of council, if they say, they want to go to the National Day of Violence Against Women and they want to attend some ceremony, there's nothing stopping those councillors from going and making that request to council and council approving it. I mean, the policy should be able to allow that. If it doesn't say that right now, maybe that's the change we need to have, that, council can always approve an attendance by a council or representative at any event upon request and approval by council. Rather than having this endless list, keep it simple. And if there's something that, any particular council feels strongly about that they feel they want to attend, they make the request to council and the council decides whether they're supported or not. I think that might be the solution if it's not there already. I don't want to peruse through it right now, but I thought there was something.
Well, it says members of council shall forward all invitations for special events to the clerk for inclusion on the next council agenda. So an hourly per diem payment to a member of council for attending a special event will be paid where council, via resolution, directs the member of council to attend. Council approval is not required for the following. Those are the 5 there. So
there you go.
Yeah,
I think we've got that covered then. I was looking at the end of that paragraph to find it in. So thanks for at the front. So I think if we just add in that Truth and Reconciliation Day, and I think that might cover it. And if they question it back, we just simply say then council members can make their request for any other what they deem to be a significant day. Carly, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Member Dooman bringing that up because I was just going to say that the invitations are supposed to be forwarded through me for vetting, and I would be making recommendations on whether they could attend or whether it would require council approval. So those ones could kind of be weeded out with the way that the policy is written now. And of course, the original list of 5 that was generated was based on things that we were seeing come forward to council for approval. And National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was kind of left off that list because it wasn't one where council resolution had been passed to authorize attendance. People may have informally gone, but it wasn't something that had been debated. So I think the suggestion from the committee to include that one is absolutely fair. And everything that doesn't sort of fall within that list of 6 now would go to council and could potentially be added to the policy at a later date if there's an established record of attendance.
Well, it's very appropriate to have that listed specifically as we are all on San territory. So I think it's important to the community that we are living in too. So sounds good.
Okay, I think staff have enough of direction there in terms of making those changes. So I don't think we have a resolution at this point. So I'll just leave it. Is that fair, Carly? Just let you guys make those changes. We don't really have any amendments right now to approve until you maybe make some revisions. Correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have documented all of the feedback, and we'll certainly incorporate that to bring it back to the committee. The recommendation that's on the floor is fairly broad, just that the committee provide that feedback. So we would be happy to address all of it based on the committee's discussion today without amendment.
Okay. So I'll move on then. We don't have any unfinished business. We don't have any new business, but we should try to determine what the next date for the next meeting. So staff will need some time to put, these changes together. I'll let them say how much time they need, and then we'll start looking at dates.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't intend to drag this out for the committee, so I'm happy to accommodate like 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks, whatever the committee is comfortable with in terms of their availability.
So you need 3 or at least 3, I think.
Yeah, I think through you, Mr. Chair, the committee could meet at the beginning of March or potentially the last week of February, if that works.
How's everybody for the 23rd, same time?
I'm available on 23rd.
Bill, good? Ann?
Works for me.
I have a board meeting at 5, but I think it's probably going to be a Zoom meeting. So yeah.
That works for you then?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that work, Carly? 23rd?
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, I was nodding my head in agreement.
Okay, good. Okay.
So 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, February 23rd.
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So now I just need to adjournment. That the meeting be adjourned at, I don't have the clock handy here in a sec. 4:04 p.m. Can I have a mover and a seconder? I got Ron, I got Ann. All in favor? We are adjourned.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, good discussion.
Thanks, everybody.
In a few
Good
weeks.
discussion. Yep. Bye now.
Bye-bye.